Hello and welcome to A Daily Burn. I'm your host, Eric Miller. I'm joined today by a wonderful progressive candidate from the great state of Tennessee, Aftyn Behn. How you doing, Aftyn?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for taking some time to chat with me. Full disclosure, I had been doing these um, pretty frequently a couple years ago, and then I really trailed off. So you're my first one back, and I'm very pleased that it is you because I watched some of the work you did around the Tennessee Three, and when you announced your run for the House seat in the Tennessee State House, I was like, oh my, this is exactly the kind of person that I want to talk to and profile on Daily Burn. So it's a real pleasure and honor to chat with you. So let's kind of go through a little bit of the history and a little bit of your platform and so forth. Um, Tennessee 51 is Nashville area. What? Just talk a little bit about your district. I think it's North Nashville.
So, much to the upset of my Republican colleagues, I have all of downtown Nashville, including
Okay.
all of the stadiums, and the Capitol and the administrative offices of the Tennessee legislature.
Okay.
It then extends to East Nashville and Madison, which is where a lot of local country musicians live and thrive and call home. And then kind of the neighborhood next to the Nashville airport called Donaldson, which is becoming an up-and-coming neighborhood as well.
Okay, great. And there was some redistricting, and I think how did that affect the district?
Yeah. So as you probably, we'll talk about later on the show, perhaps, but Tennessee is one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. I think there was a study, an article from Vox that listed Tennessee as the least Democratic state in the entire country. But with redistricting, the district became more Democratic, and it's shifted a bit to include more of, as you said, more northern downtown Nashville, and kind of extended. But inevitably, I also have Opry Mills in my district as well. So it's
Okay.
quite a diverse district. Yes.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, I think federally Tennessee only has maybe one representative. I think both senators are right.
Yeah, so we had, if you remember, we had two Democratic congressmen, Representative Jim Cooper and Representative Steve Cohen. And the Republicans, I think, got a little bit greedy and decided to cut up our congressional district in Nashville. And so I actually share a district with a representative who lives about 2 hours away. And so it's been a difficult year to be a Nashvilleian, I have to say.
Okay. Well, hopefully that's going to change, right? So this election is September 14th is a general, and the history of this, the previous incumbent had passed away, and there was a special primary, which you won, I think, handily, if I'm not mistaken, right?
By 600 votes, but
Okay.
just to tell, not that I have to be a Bernie endorser on here, but I'm more of the left flank of the party. I was a Bernie endorser in 2020. My opponent was supported by a lot of the establishment Democrats in Nashville as well as the state. And I ended up winning by over 600 votes in a special election. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and I wouldn't be talking to you otherwise. You check all the boxes: Medicare for all, living wage, right? You're not. I'm assuming you're not funded by ExxonMobil, right? I'm taking
not last time I checked. No.
Right, right on. But yeah, a lot has been going on in the Tennessee State House. Around the Tennessee Three. Hopefully, you'll be Tennessee Four at some point, right? Can you just catch us up for those people that don't know? Like, what is the latest? This is Gloria Johnson, Justin Pearson, Justin Jones got expelled, and I don't think that's just two of them did, right? But can you catch people up on the latest? What's been happening?
Yeah, so I'll start with the last week of March of this year, which honestly I've aged 100 years, it feels like. But the last week of March, we had a school shooting at the Covenant School, and I think it's important for your audience to note that that week was, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it because it's still it feels so real and visceral. But that week was Trans Day of Visibility. And it turned out that the shooter of the Covenant shooting was trans, identified as trans. And that week, we actually had to cancel all of our Trans Day of Visibility events because of right-wing violent threats. And my partner has a trans child. And so this this was the first, I would say, of my radicalizing journey to decide to run for office. I never wanted to run for office. I've been an organizer in Tennessee for a long time, electoral and advocacy. But we had to cancel all the events. And within 2 weeks, that was when all the protests were held outside the Capitol. I actually planned the entire day, along with my friend Julie, the Planned Parenthood organizer, the entire day of April 6th, which for those of you that weren't following, I think it was like a play-by-play as to the Tennessee legislature. We had every single news station here. That was the day of the expulsions. And so at the end of that day, I'd been at the Capitol for 18 hours. I was drenched. I was holding my pug, like running around like a mad woman, trying to organize the final press conference of the night. And I had all of the major news outlets lined up. I had this beautiful backdrop of multi-generational, multi-class, multiracial constituency, the best of Tennessee, a buffet of speakers from all across the state. And as I was holding space for the Tennessee Three, a few white male legislators ended up, Democrats, tried to elbow their way to the spotlight. And I said, no, not today. And they basically said, step aside. This is for legislators, little girl. And so, I had a snapped moment. I don't know if you follow,
No.
Yes, I heard loud circus music and saw red. And I thought, you know what? I can't ask another person to run for office if I'm not willing to do it myself. So then and there, I had decided to primary the sitting representative. And unfortunately, deeply terrible circumstances, he passed away in June, which forced a special election. And I had already decided that I was going to run. And here we are.
Amazing. Wow. And there were some more issues with the, so the right wing, the rise of fascism or outright fascism in the state house, even as recent as last week. What's the latest? What's happening now?
Yeah, so I think it's important for your audience to understand the political landscape of Tennessee right now and why it's just so dire and why the Tennessee Three moment happened. So in Tennessee, we don't have competitive elections. I actually had coffee with a Vanderbilt political science professor a few weeks ago, and I asked her, I use the word authoritarian very loosely on Twitter to describe Tennessee politics. Is it true? And she said, yes, the first tenet of authoritarianism is uncompetitive elections, and we have none of them. It's often this congratulatory circle with Republicans after they win elections, by 75%. And it's like, that's actually not supposed to be the case. The second major point for your audience is that in Tennessee, they have removed the ability for us to have popular ballot measures. So, for example, abortion access is 6 for 6 in states like Kansas, Kentucky, and hopefully Ohio in November. They removed our ability to do that. And then third of all, they removed the ability for the governor to pass anything by executive authority. So say we had an Andy Beshear, for example, like Kentucky does, and he wanted to pass Medicaid expansion. Impossible. So they have literally, and they broke up our congressional district. They preempt our blue cities from passing any popular ballot. So say we pass Medicare for all at the Nashville, at the municipal level, they would say, nope, not today. So things are the conditions, the political conditions, and the democracy is hanging by a thread in this state. And I think that's what people don't quite understand about why the Tennessee Three moment happened, is because they were shutting off mics from, in committees. They were removing access for the Justins and Representative Gloria Johnson. So things are really that bad, and they're just deteriorating. I don't think you can watch what's happening right now and not step in. The last thing I want to tell your audience and for you is that Nashville has become the epicenter of far-right anti-trans organizing in the country. So Matt Walsh currently lives in Nashville. During the pandemic, Tommy Lauren, Candace Owens, and Ben Shapiro all moved to Nashville, and they are bringing in national resources. They are bringing in Matt Walsh organized a national anti-trans rally. So we are living, breathing fascism is alive in Tennessee, and we're fighting it every day.
Wow. With the, Justin and Justin got a lot of national attention, and those guys were the right speakers at that right moment, right? I mean, couldn't have had more perfect voices at that point in time, right? Hopefully yourself and, not to exclude Gloria, of course, but, has that sort of national profile, like, have you seen the cavalry coming? Like, what's the result of that in terms of, hopefully a positive shift? if any?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I will say, I was at the special session. So for your listeners who haven't been following Tennessee politics like you have apparently meticulously, there was calls to hold a special session, and so we had a special session 2 weeks ago. I was there every day at the legislature, and when I tell you that they did not learn anything from April, let me just tell you, they learned nothing, and in fact, they've become worse.
Yeah.
So there's not even, and now you have these, more woke, if you will, but mothers in West Nashville who are, religious, who are Republican, who are very beautiful. And they've decided that they're going to primary these people because they're just not listening to even their constituencies. And so, but what that moment did, and the Tennessee 3 is that it elevated states like Tennessee that have been long forgotten by the national entities, by the DSCC, by the DLCC, a lot of these national entities. We just haven't had not a competitive state. We're not a battleground. But when you leave states like Tennessee alone for a decade, look what happens. And so I will say that right now, especially with Representative Gloria Johnson announcing her Senate bid, that the DSCC has placed their finger in a primary, but is supporting Gloria and using national resources to do that. So I do think, I had a meeting with union leadership today, and I was, talking to them about my optimism and hope for the state, which feels so, I don't know, because I haven't been hopeful for a long time.
Wow. Well, first off, you said they didn't learn anything. They're not trying to learn anything. It's not, they're not good intentioned on the issues, right? They're bad faith about it, right? So in fact, they learn the other direction, like you said, to get further entrenched and so forth. I do want to talk about Gloria. I had in 2020, was it Marquita Bradshaw ran for the other Senate seat, and I had her on at the time, and I think she got like 35% or somewhere thereabouts. It wasn't terrible, but so the seat that Gloria, I think, is running for is Marsha Blackburn, which is next November, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe I'll have you on before then. But, I want to ask about, I think you've worked a lot in, sort of progressive rural engagement, right? Nashville is, sort of a metropolitan area, right? And I would presume more progressive than, maybe some of the rural areas around Nashville. What through your work gives you, hope or focus in terms of, turning this tide? I imagine, rank and file, policy by policy, if you talk to an individual voter, they're on board with the policy because progressive policies poll 70, 80%, whatever. Right. So, how can you translate that into, the shifts in the legislation? Like you said, there's other activists that are going to run in primaries and so forth. Like, just talk about that scene and your optimism around that.
I think what's most difficult as a progressive electoral organizer, and I've worked at the national and state level, is that, as you said, populist progressive policies are popular. It's a lot of alliteration, but they are, and they win every time, all the time. And that's why states like Tennessee have removed the ability for us to do that. Now, in terms of, I think there's a political answer to your question, which is, and it seems to be, this is what I ran on, which is breaking the supermajority for the politicos out there. There's a different way I would talk about that in rural communities, but breaking the supermajority, because right now we don't even have enough Democrats in the Tennessee House to make sure that bills have a second reading. We don't have the ability to, so if the Republicans are trying to force a bad bill, we don't even have a quorum to walk out and stop proceedings. I mean, it's so dire. So my goal and what I ran on was supporting the caucus in flipping 3 to 4 seats in 2024, which is our ultimate goal. We've got some competitive seats, so that we can be on our way to breaking that and hopefully end up, making sure that our progressive policies are heard in committee and have a chance on the floor. The other thing that's happening, and I think this is important for people that you talk to in more resource-strapped states, is that when there is a bad vote taken in the legislature, red states that don't have a lot of investment aren't able to directly communicate to that constituency, telling them what a bad vote what vote just happened.
Right.
And so in states like Minnesota, more of your well-resourced, your solid ecosystem states that have a functioning caucus, a functioning party, a functioning 501c4 table, they are able to, do a lot of the organizing when it comes to the legislature. So we don't have that. So I think what I've learned, especially in my trials and tribulations as a rural organizer in Tennessee, is that there is an absolute appetite for populist policies. Is just how you mentioned, like, how do you, with all of the challenges and barriers that we have, like, how do we actually pass those and get that to the people? And just, sorry, Eric, one anecdote that I just want to share.
No, please, yeah.
It has to do with Medicare for All. So I got my start in Tennessee as a Medicaid expansion organizer. And when Trump went after the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid, I was out in the hollers of East Tennessee talking about the importance of a healthcare program. Now, you and I believe that we need a nationalized healthcare program in the United States, but that is a foreign idea to a lot of people in Tennessee. Now, when in upper Northeast Tennessee, there were two rural hospitals that ended up merging. So we're talking about a medical monopoly. And my friend led a 1 year, she camped outside a rural hospital for almost 360 days, highlighting the impact of medical monopolies and why we need a nationalized healthcare system. And when I tell you, I went up there and I took videos of people wearing MAGA hats saying we need universal health care. Right. So when it directly impacts them and you have someone that is mobilizing these rural constituencies and drawing a direct line between corporate greed and, it's us versus them, it's the masses versus the corporations and the billionaires, it's easy for people to see that, right? And so yeah, I wanted to say that because that's an anecdote that I think people like, especially a lot of liberal coastal states, they're like, oh, you get what you vote for. But in states like Tennessee, like, we're just so strapped and we have to, it takes deep organizing that often we don't have the resources for.
Yeah. And then you would imagine, I mean, this is speculation, but, they might be there on the front lines in the cause and supporting it, but then they sort of return to their media bubble and, they absorb the lies. Donald Trump said no one's going to be dying. Like in 2015, he ran on Medicare for All. It was bullshit, but that's what he ran on, and they believed it, right? And they believe everything he says, right? He didn't call it Medicare for All. He said, everyone, he just conned his way through it, right? But they're manipulated with those messages, and the propagandists know what they're doing, right? So ultimately when they get in the ballot box, they see the one that's been demonized and the one that's been elevated, and they think so how do you, I mean, that's an impossible question, but how do you break that? Do you think any of those people in your anecdote broke free of their media bubble that actually saw the light, said, oh, okay, I'm actually voting against my interests when I do this?
I don't necessarily think it's as seamless and acute as that understanding that their lived reality translates into electoral outcomes immediately. Right. But I will say, like, if this organizer ever decided to run for office, she would run as a Democrat, and I'm sure it would cause people a lot of cognitive dissonance in your district to be like, wait a minute, right. Wait a minute, what?
All right. Wow. Yeah, I do want to. I want to. Offline, you can send me some of the other names that are going to be running, because I think that's interesting. So yours is a special election. September 14th is the day. It's a solidly blue district, right? So if anyone's in the sound of our voices, you should get out and vote for Aftyn. But this is the role you're playing here is a bit more transformative at a national level, in my opinion, right? Which I think is absolutely amazing. So is there any way to leverage sort of the progressive hub of Nashville, where into the more rural voters, like I don't want to call it the privilege of the Nashville progressive community, like how do you leverage that to grow it right outside of?
I just got goosebumps. I'm a really tactile person, but that's what I ran on, and I think what was really striking about my race in the primary is that two great Democrats, well, me on the socialist left, progressive left. But I ran on, hey, we are a very privileged and powerful district, what can we do to support Black and Brown communities across the state? What can we do to build the rural and urban solidarity that is necessary to fighting back fascism? And just as a side route, I think what was really striking during the Tennessee 3 protest, and this was an op-ed I tried to write but never found the time because behold, I decided to run for office, but it was incredible to see. I mean, all of these organizers from across the state were thrown into a group chat, right? And there were people that were coming from Polk County, Tennessee, which is on the like South Carolina border. And they're like, okay, I'm coming up to Tennessee. I'm going to grab, 50 water bottles and stop at Kinko's. What does everyone need? And it was just this amazing, organic, beautiful moment where urban and rural organizers came together. Wow. Urban groups raised money so that rural organizers and trans activists could travel to Nashville. And it was just like, I look back at that moment. It's something that I've tried to generate throughout my entire organizing career in Tennessee. And it just never happened organically. And I'm like, oh, it takes like the total destruction of our democracy to facilitate that. Yeah, right. But what was beautiful about that is there's just such an appetite. And the other thing that I had to do was fundraise across the state. And there were so many, I'd be in these counties and they're like, the reason we care so much about your race is because you are our only representation in Tennessee. We have no Democrats. Imagine they have no Democrats at any level of government representing their interests. And it feels isolating and alienating. So I plan to do as a legislator is one, electorally, is to adopt a district. So I'm going to pitch that to my district, hopefully as soon as I'm elected, and go out and help these rural communities build the constituency and organizing capacity they need. But then also, I think what was also a really fun note. So my name is Behn. So I will be the first in the Tennessee General Assembly directory. And what I've heard is you field calls all across the state because people just see the first person on the list and they call them. And so what I plan to do, and a lot of this is adopting Stacey Abrams' strategy in Georgia, is that I'm going to have a warehouse directory where when people call across the state and they need help, right? Like they don't know who I am from, Phil Bredesen, but they're like, oh, she answered, she picked up, how can I direct resources? So I really plan to leverage my position of power in a Democratic district to support rural organizing across the state.
That's fantastic. Wow. That's amazing. Godspeed on that. Let me ask just one or two sort of platform policy questions. I know it doesn't get enough coverage, but sports arenas get tons of breaks and whatnot. And I think your district has the biggest one in the country. And I'm assuming, all the handouts that go with that. Can you talk about the Tennessee Titans arena?
God. This is the hill I'm going to die on. So before this moment, and just to tell, I have a history of a professional history of working on challenging corporate monopolies, whether those are hospital medical monopolies, et cetera, and in rural organizing as well. The Titan Stadium deal, so for your listeners, the state government, so state leadership in Tennessee, the Republicans in charge, said, we are going to force this deal down Nashville's throat. I'm sorry for being so vulgar, but it truly was. We are going to concoct the worst deal possible, and we are going to put lipstick on it and tell them it's a good deal, right? Then what they did is they bought the loyalties of Nashville council people. So our body at the municipal level is called council persons, bought their loyalty, right? And then passed the most expensive taxpayer-funded stadium in American history.
Right.
With little to no objection. Now, this was a defining moment of my primary candidacy against my opponent because he took money from the Titans lobbyist, right? And so I ran a mailer that said schools, not stadiums, right?
Awesome.
But what we're seeing, and I think what's striking is that this is always passed down as a good deal for communities, right? And it's not. And the American Economic Liberties Project, I highly recommend their literature. Again and again, they have studied the impact of these, and they always say that it leaves taxpayers on the hook. And my district was upset. And so what I ran on was what would a proactive response have looked like that, right? Like they think our hands are tied, the Republicans aren't giving us anything to negotiate with, right? Well, as an organizer, what I might have done was I would have held town halls and I would have invited the governor, I would have invited the press, I would have invited Republican leadership and said, this is what my district and the adjacent House districts want out of this deal. And as a delegation, as Nashville's House representatives, we are not conceding anything until we get this deal. Granted, proof of concept is not there because I haven't tried it out yet.
Right.
But I just think that this acquiescence towards an authoritarian regime is not benefiting anyone, right? And when you lay down, I think what's really funny is like, okay, maybe this time they'll give us something. Have your bullies ever said after they beat the crap out of you, like, now I'm going to be nice to you? No.
Yeah. It's like an abuser. You know, they're not going to stop the cycle until it benefits.
Exactly.
Is that something that you could tactically use, you know, again, framing it around the privilege of Nashville, taking it outside of Nashville, you know, being as vocal as you are about that being a terrible deal and expensive at the, you know, at the taxpayer expense. Imagine what we could have done, like you said, schools, not stadiums, right? You know, you could literally use that, you know, X dollars was spent on of yours was spent on the stadium. What would you have preferred that have gone into? Your health care, right? Your, you know, whatever, right? You could take that to elevate, you know, and, you know, maybe that could be something tactically. Yeah, I'm sure I'm not giving you any news that you haven't already thought about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel living in Tennessee, it is like, it's feeling gaslit every day of your life. Like they tell you that things are good, that your standard of living is good, that you want to give boondoggles to billionaires and bachelorettes. Like, no, actually, I really don't want that.
Yeah,
and I think what's really striking is that just recently an article came out that the Titans profitability increased 22% after this deal. And yet we're on the hook for it. I mean, it's just, so I do plan, you know, I have already mentioned fighting corporate monopolies as a C4 that I work closely with at the national level. And I've said, you know, as soon as I'm elected, I'm happy to go on my stump speech. Like, put me in, coach, because this is going to continue to happen. And our stadium over $1 billion. I mean, they're just going to try to keep passing these across the country.
Yeah. Let me ask about how climate change. I know you're an advocate for Green New Deal. How has climate change reared its ugly head in Nashville, and are people aware of it? Are they, you know, ahead of the curve, laggards? What do they stand on climate change?
I mean, we're in a climate denial state, and it's really sad. Right now in Nashville, obviously heat is a major concern, especially for our unhoused populations. But I think the most acute example I can use is in a few counties over, there was major flooding. And, you know, obviously we know it's going to be a perennial event at this point. But I think what's striking is that there's not someone there talking about in systems thinking, right? Like, how is this, you know, you're directly impacted, let's set up a mutual aid, but then like, what are the policies that we can put in place, obviously? So I'm really relying on, we have a mayoral runoff right now with a progressive and a Republican. And I'm really hoping if that person is elected that we can at least start in Nashville, you know, some climate protocols that we can put in place to be one of, you know, the top cities in the country. The problem is we're always last to do the right thing. And I want to be first to do the right thing. But I do think it's going to, you know, these incidents are going to continue to increase. And I think people are going to blame, you know, continue to scapegoat immigrants, which is why it's really important for at least, you know, from a progressive organizer perspective, what I'm thinking about is when these climate disasters happen, who are the first people to go in and help them?
Right.
White supremacists. And that's happened a lot in Tennessee because they've set up shop, they're buying property, and they're the first ones there, and they're organizing with their narrative. So I think in my collective and you know, what I'm going to be trying to do as a legislator is when these things happen, you know, partner with whoever I can in these areas, but then, you know, watching kind of this organizing vacuum happen in real time and trying to fill it with a progressive approach.
Right on. You mentioned the mayoral runoff. Is that Van? What's the candidate's name?
It's Freddie O'Connell versus Alice Foley.
Okay, so who do we like?
Freddie.
Freddie, okay. Who else is on? So yours is a special election, but who else should we know about working on this front in your area?
Yeah, so right now it's just the mayoral runoff. I'm really proud of Nashville because so the August 3rd was my primary, but it was also the major municipal election. We have a runoff now, but it was a progressive night for Nashville. And that was pretty shocking to me because I think having attended the Matt Walsh anti-trans protest, and seeing a lot of these far right forces settle in Nashville, I really thought that there would be a surge of Republican voters, et cetera. And it turned out to be a really progressive night for Nashville. And I don't know if that's if that's a reaction to the legislature. But in terms of races, progressive mayor for Nashville is a very exciting, moment for us. We've only had kind of Republican light Democrats. So that's really exciting. And then I think, next year is going to be a big year. I think all eyes will be on Tennessee with Gloria for Senate. And then, what I can do in some of these flippable races.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to try to reach out to Gloria at some point here. We got a little bit of time on that. Anything else just that you want to cover? I think we covered a good bit of ground here, and I certainly offer my platform to you anytime you want to talk about anything. But anything else for now that you think people should know about? Again, September 14th is the special election. Aftyn Behn is .com is your website. People can donate and follow you. Your Twitter handle's there, X handle, I suppose you call it nowadays. But anything else that you want to, any issues that you, want to focus on or highlight?
Yeah, so I'll end with one, but I ran on the care economy. And I think in Tennessee, especially in a right to work state like Tennessee, the nexus of labor and caring, I think is something that is not at the forefront of a lot of folks' minds. But what I see when I go out and organize in Tennessee is I see home health care workers making sub-living wages. And these are entire constituencies of people that would be, pro-labor, but we just don't have the resources to support that type of organizing. So all of that to say is I really hope for my sake that I can, my mom was a caregiver for my grandmother, but that's a main tenet of my campaign platform is supporting the care economy and supporting home healthcare workers and a lot of folks that take care of the most vulnerable in our state. So I'm excited. Hopefully I can figure out some creative avenues for that type of policy, but just to say that it's one that's near and dear to my heart. Finally, I will end that once I'm elected on September 14th, I will be the youngest serving woman in the Tennessee House and the only woman representing Nashville. So this is really, as my mom says, it's the year of Barbie. It's the year of the woman. And it truly is. I think a lot of people are just tired with politics as is, and they want change. And that was clear, in my race. So thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Honestly, I can't wait to see the good trouble that you're going to make in the Tennessee State House. And, as much as I said about Justin Pearson and Justin Jones being the right people in the right spot at the right time, they couldn't have a better tag team partner joining them next month. Right. So, Godspeed to you. Again, it's aftynbehn.com. Your special election, September 14th. And we'll be following what you do. I appreciate it so much. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me. And again, anytime you want to come back on, if there's an issue, you have a platform here. Happy to share it with you.
Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching.